3,000 years ago, an ancient poet named Homer gave the world the Odyssey, a mythic blueprint of survival, isolation, and the terrifying cost of war. For centuries, Hollywood has treated this story like a loud, fantasy spectacle filled with cartoonish monsters and green screen magic. But when Christopher Nolan gets his hands on a budget of $250 million and decides to shoot a mythic epic entirely on raw IMAX film, you know you aren't getting a standard blockbuster. You are getting an event. Welcome back to the spoiler-free zone. Today, we are breaking down one of the most anticipated cinematic releases of 2026, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Now, let's clear the air immediately before we dive deep. This is a completely spoiler-free sanctuary. I am not going to ruin a single narrative twist, character fate, or creative liberty that Nolan takes with this legendary poem. You can watch this fully relaxed, whether you've already bought your IMAX tickets or you're trying to decide if it's worth the premium price tag. The first thing you need to understand about Nolan's approach is what he calls tactile realism. If you are going into this movie expecting glowing magic wands, Marvel-style creature CGI, or flashy fantasy tropes, adjust your expectations right now. Nolan has stripped the mythos down to its absolute, bone-chilling reality. Think about how he handled the historical weight of Oppenheimer or the survival grit of Dunkirk. He applies that exact same grounded philosophy here. The supernatural elements of Homer's poem, the sirens, the cyclops, the wrath of Poseidon, aren't treated like physical comic book monsters. Instead, Nolan reframes them as intense, psychological terrors, natural anomalies, and the hallucinatory madness of an exhausted crew lost at sea for a decade. By anchoring the narrative in actual physical stakes, the danger feels immediate. When a wave hits the side of Odysseus's ship, you aren't looking at a digital asset rendered in a computer lab. You are looking at thousands of gallons of real water slamming into a practical set. That commitment to physical filmmaking completely changes the texture of the movie. Now, let's talk about the structure, because this is where the Nolan purists are going to have an absolute field day. In classic Nolan fashion, time is not a straight line. But what's brilliant here is that he didn't just invent a gimmick. He's actually honoring the original structure of the epic poem. Homer's Odyssey famously begins in the middle of the story, with Odysseus already trapped, before using flashbacks to tell us how he got there. Nolan takes that concept and supercharges it. The film weaves seamlessly between three distinct perspectives. Odysseus facing structural isolation on the open sea, his son Telemachus, played with incredible vulnerability by Tom Holland, navigating the political corruption back home in Ithaca, and the agonizing, silent endurance of Anne Hathaway's Penelope. The editing is dizzying but meticulously deliberate. It creates a structural puzzle where memory, trauma, and reality blur together. It demands your absolute focus from the very first frame, but it avoids feeling pretentious or bloated. Instead, it mirrors the psychological disintegration of a soldier who has been away from home for 20 years and is slowly forgetting what home even looks like. From a technical standpoint, The Odyssey is a historic achievement. This is the first feature film shot completely, from start to finish, on IMAX film cameras. The sheer visual density is overwhelming. The cinematography by Janusz Kaminski uses natural lighting to capture the terrifying vastness of the ocean. In standard theaters, this movie will look incredible, but if you have access to a true 70mm IMAX screen, it is an absolute mandatory watch in that format. The scale makes you feel completely insignificant against the backdrop of nature. But as massive as the visuals are, the sound design is what truly steals the show. Ludwig Göransson delivers a score that completely breaks away from typical Hollywood sword-and-sandals music. There are no swelling, heroic brass sections here. Instead, Göransson utilizes an aggressive, industrial, percussive ticking clock motif mixed with haunting, distorted vocal arrangements. It creates a constant state of low-level anxiety. The soundscape makes a silent, fog-covered ocean feel infinitely more terrifying than an army of CGI monsters ever could. The silence in this movie screams. None of this technical wizardry would matter without the performances to back it up. Matt Damon delivers arguably the most physically demanding and emotionally raw performance of his career. His Odysseus isn't a flawless mythical hero. He is an exhausted, deeply flawed strategist collapsing under the weight of his own hubris and isolation. The ensemble cast is equally stellar. Robert Pattinson brings an incredibly menacing, sharp edge to his role as the deceptive suitor Antinous, while Lupita Nyong'o commands every single frame she enters. Ultimately, The Odyssey is a staggering masterclass in grand-scale, auteur filmmaking. It is a dense, intense, and uncompromised cinematic experience that honors its ancient source material while making it feel entirely revolutionary. It receives an absolute, highest-tier recommendation from the spoiler-free zone. It is an essential piece of cinema. But now, I want to pass the microphone over to you, the community. Christopher Nolan made a massive gamble here by completely removing traditional fantasy elements and relying entirely on realistic, practical effects to tell a mythological story. Do you think this grounded, psychological approach is the right way to adapt ancient myths? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a massive debate going. Just remember to keep your comments strictly spoiler-free. Hit that like button, subscribe to the spoiler-free zone, and I'll see you at the next movie.